Good afternoon, everyone. We will be starting our meeting in just a moment. Okay, we've got a lot of people. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Aurelie Diaz, and I am a technical advisor in the Affordable Rental Housing Division. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Today we have an exciting training prepared for you. As many of you know, our technical advisor team has launched the Ask the Experts training series to spotlight the different ARH teams and give our partners a chance to hear directly from program staff and get clarity on the topics that matter most to your projects. And today's session is going to be featuring our 9% low-income housing tax credit team, or our LIHTC team. With the 9% LIHTC round opening on January 14th, this is a perfect time to walk through the process and hear from the team. So we're excited to have you with us this afternoon, and we hope that this session offers a lot of information. As you can see on the screen, our OHCS experts joining us today are Jacqueline Santiago and Ty Dunson-Strain. They're going to be walking us through the 9% LIHTC process and sharing their insights from the program side. And we're also pleased to welcome our guest speaker, who is Anne Malone from US Bank. Anne will be offering a market perspective and sharing valuable insight into what investors are looking for in today's environment. So we're really looking forward to hearing from her as well. So we've got a great lineup. We're excited to learn from our experts. Next slide, please. As always, I want to remind everyone of the general agreements that we practice here at OHCS. Throughout the presentations and also the Q&As, we ask that you please help foster an inclusive environment, stay engaged, speak your truth responsibly, listen to understand, be willing to do things differently and experience discomfort, and expect and accept non-closure. So thank you ahead of time for participating in these agreements. Next slide, please. Before we jump in today's training, just a couple of housekeeping reminders for everyone. We will be using polls throughout today's training just to keep things interactive. So when a poll comes up, it will appear directly on your screen and you can participate by selecting your response. If you happen to run into any technical issues, or perhaps you're watching this recording later, don't worry, we will be reading the poll questions and then the responses out loud so you can easily follow along. We're also going to have live Q&A portion of the training where you're going to hear directly from our experts. In fact, today we have two Q&A sessions or Q&A opportunities. So that's something we're looking forward to. During the presentations, you're welcome to submit your questions using the Q&A button that's at the top of your screen. So we ask that you please submit the same question only once, but of course you're more than welcome to ask multiple questions. When we reach the Q&A segment, we'll go through the questions that were submitted, and you'll have, at the end, you'll have an option to come on screen or off mic if you wish to ask more questions live. So we please ask that everyone is patient and respectful so that our experts have the space to provide thoughtful responses. If you do happen to have a question that is specific to your project, or perhaps it's a question that requires more detail than what we can cover during this training, someone from either the LIHTC team or a technical advisor will follow up with you afterward to ensure that you get the information that you need. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to give you a quick overview of today's agenda, we'll start by hearing from our guest speaker. And then after that, we'll have a short Q&A focused specifically on market-related questions. So anything that's connected to the OHCS 9% process, we'll save that for the second Q&A later in the training. After that first Q&A, Jackie has a great presentation prepared for you. She'll walk through the key information about this year's 9% round and highlight what contributes to a strong and successful request. And once she wraps up, she and the rest of the LIHTC team will be available to answer your questions during that final Q&A. Next slide. Okay, so to get us started, we have our first poll. You should see the poll on your screen now. So we want to learn a little bit about your experience with LIHTC and what you're hoping to get out of today's training. So hopefully everyone can see that on their screen. So I'll read out the questions. Number one, have you done 9% deals through OHCS before? Number two, what information are you hoping to learn during this training? Is it how to apply for 9%? What the current tax credit market looks like? Or resource availability? And then number three is, have you talked to an investor about your project? So we'll just give a few seconds just to make sure everyone had a chance to complete that. Okay. Well, I see a lot of responses, so thank you so much for your participation. So what we'll do now is I'm going to pass it on to Ty, and he will be presenting our very first speaker. Go ahead, Ty.
Thanks for the handoff. Yeah, thanks everybody for taking the time today. We're here. We have the pleasure of having Ann Malone. We're here with U.S. Bank. She's been with U.S. Bank for looks like close to 12 years now, and had covering Oregon, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma. I'm not going to read off all the states that you cover on LinkedIn. But you also commissioner with the Washington State Housing Finance Agency, a board member for Community Roots, board treasurer for Pacific Northwest Women's Affordable Housing Network, and a slew of community work, and we're just delighted that you had the time today to take to spend with us, and definitely whatever words of wisdom you could pass along to the audience, and we're happy that you had some time in your schedule today.
Thank you, Ty. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks to OHCS for inviting me to present about the state of the tax credit investor market and what you all can do to be prepared and make your 9% project stand out from the crowd. As Ty said, my name is Ann Malone. I'm a senior vice president and a business development officer. And my responsibility is to originate new LIHTC investments in 13 states on behalf of US Bank. I've actually been with the bank for 20 years, all in affordable housing finance, and I am your neighbor to the north in Seattle. We can go to the next slide if we are not there, the pictures. US Bank is the country's 5th largest commercial bank and has a long history in Oregon. At US Bancorp Impact Finance, which is a subsidiary of the bank, we are a nationally known leading investor and lender in the new construction and renovation of affordable rental housing. And for more than 3 decades, our financing has helped provide a stable, quality place to live for those who need it most. Our financing creates more than just buildings. It's an investment in the people who live there. We help create communities with resident services that can help meet people where they are, whether they're families needing workforce housing, seniors, veterans, people experiencing mental health issues, addiction, or homelessness. We have actually helped to create close to 150,000 affordable housing units by investing almost $21 billion in tax credit equity, and we currently have $4 billion in affordable housing loan commitments. And to give you a sense of our commitment in Portland and beyond, since its founding, our group has invested more than $690 million in equity and provided over $880 million in loans towards affordable housing developments across Oregon. That is 150 different deals that have helped finance construction of nearly 13,000 housing units in the state of Oregon. Next slide, please. So if you didn't already know, investors are having problems right now. There has been a large shift in the overall economic, banking, regulatory environment coming out of COVID. And it can be kind of summed up by there are problem projects, there are problem portfolios, there are problem markets, and there are problem partners. So investors have responded by tightening up on how many deals they do, where those deals are, and with whom. So we've seen this manifest as a downshift in appetite for permanent supportive housing projects, as well as steering away from certain geographies where there are more problems than usual, like my hometown of Seattle. That you have problems are stretched, assets are not performing as well as they used to, and are producing less cash flow. It's harder to lease up certain types of units in certain areas, and it's really difficult to retain staff and help residents manage through all the things that they may be going through. Next slide, please. So now you're here at this training because you have a great opportunity to present a deal that could really work with a 9% credit to OHCS. You can provide impact in your community and for the people who will live in your development or benefit from the rehab. Because you are proactive and brilliant, you start reaching out to the private financing partners that you know, the investors, syndicators, and lenders. But maybe we should stop and say, what's the difference? So investors are folks like myself who represent a bank or another financial institution who will partner with you directly in your project. Syndicators represent a variety of investors, and they also work with you to structure the investment, and then they work in a different way with the investor to make sure that their needs are met. And the lenders, of course, may be large banks, small banks, consortiums like NOAA, or large agencies like Freddie Mac. But here is what we, in general, all want to see. So for the sponsor, we want to see your financials. For individuals, that's personal financial statements. For organizations, it's audits. So 2 years worth plus the most recent interim. We want to see a schedule showing all of your real estate that's operating under construction and in pre-development, how it's performing and what stage it's in. And guarantors, individual and corporate or nonprofit, will need to answer such questions as, have you ever had a bankruptcy or a foreclosure? And the reason for all this is that lenders and investors can't properly assess the risk of the investment or loan without this information. So if they're not asking you, you should wonder why and whether the offer they give you is going to be there when you need it. So you should also be underwriting your financial partners. For the project, you need to have it well documented. Why are you doing this project? What needs does it meet? How do you know that? Who are your partners, your property manager, your general contractor, your service providers? And what are they bringing to the table in terms of experience? Have you worked with them before? What are the total sources that will be needed to fully fund the project? Are they committed or you're applying for them? In Oregon, a market study typically isn't required for application, which saves on cost. But I want to suggest that you consider doing one anyway, because markets are changing. And having a market study will help inform your deal structure and what AMI levels, area median income levels, and rents would be best suited for that particular part or slice of the market that you're targeting. Because you want your project to be long-term sustainable. You're not going to want to put a lot of senior one-bedroom apartments in a neighborhood that's already flooded with them and has an area vacancy of 15%. Or a deal I heard about yesterday has senior 3-bedroom apartments. Doesn't make sense. Then for rehabs, which we love a rehab, so we're going to need more information. What has it cost to operate the property historically? How's the occupancy been? What work will you be doing? Or more often, what work will you not be doing? So there's quite a bit of work to do to get ready to talk to your investor and to submit your application. Next slide, please. So what are we looking for now? So in general, we are at a moment in time where there are more projects and more tax credits than an available investor capital. And you are in a unique position with a 9% project, more unique than a 4% project, where there are many, many 4% projects out there. But I have been receiving calls from people who I've never talked to before, where their investor is not interested last year, this year, for whatever reason. And when I'm considering a new project partner, I'm looking for, number one, experienced organizations and people. So that doesn't mean if this is your first project, and I think 9% rounds are a great place to do your first project. It doesn't mean that you can't find financing if you're a first timer, but it will be more difficult. And it will require you to position your project as one that brings all of the necessary skills and experience in some way. Maybe you've hired experienced people into your organization. You're using very experienced consultants. You're bringing in property management early to consult with you, or hopefully all of these, you have experienced general contractors. We're also looking for people and organizations who have cash and liquidity. So that could be cash in the bank. It could be marketable securities. The old rule of thumb for tax credit projects used to be that if you had $500,000 or so on balance sheet in cash, you were financeable. Then it kind of went to 1 million. Now there is a more complex calculation being done, which looks at any drag that might be coming from a poorly performing property or portfolio. How many projects are in construction or lease up, the size of those loans and investments, the size of the subject loan and investment, and then the characteristics or strengths of the project itself. So here my advice to you is to be as conservative as possible when designing your projects, while still satisfying OHCS and any other funders that you are being a good steward of funds. Operating expenses, long time rule of thumb was that they would increase 3% per year forever. Well, they didn't. They jumped. And should we now be more conservative and consider a higher escalation expenses and or escalation for income? Can you bring a rental subsidy to the project, like a Section 8 contract, to help support low-income or very low-income residents? Can you borrow less on the permanent mortgage, or better yet, not have a permanent mortgage and underwrite to a higher debt service coverage ratio or operating expense coverage ratio? Finally, the deal, and this is not an exhaustive list of all the ways you can be conservative in structuring your deal, but the deal needs to have cash inside of it. And so that means cash payments of developer fee. This is your developer fee that gets paid out to you when you achieve certain milestones. Investors use these amounts as a risk mitigation tool. For example, if the project doesn't lease up at the expected rents and the rents are actually lower at the time of lease up, is there cash fee available to buy down the permanent mortgage by, say, $500,000 and convert the loan to permanent? If there isn't, based on the investor's risk analysis, the investor may say, this is not the project for me to invest in. So, as I said, the most attractive 9% deals for investors have low or no permanent hard debt and conservative assumptions are with a trusted partner. They can be urban, they can be rural, but in a very small community, it's best to have some type of rental subsidy contract for the term of the compliance period, which is the 15-year tax credit partnership. And I would like to do a little ad here and let you know that last year, US Bank got approval to offer equity investments to tribal nations using the LIHTC on tribal land. So give me a call if you're planning one, please. Most important at the end of the day are relationships. Who have you worked with in the past? Where do you have your banking relationship? That's often a really good place to start. I have personally found that the longer and stronger our relationship with our developer partners, the more mutual benefits we can accrue, the more flexible we can be, and the better the projects actually turn out. Okay, I think we're on future trends. Sorry if I missed a slide there. All right, so I am definitely seeing a move from allocators and funders away from new construction, at least for this year, towards rehabilitation of existing affordable housing. this is really great. It's been sorely needed for a long time. Permanent supportive housing projects, PSH, they continue to be extremely challenging with investors based on a lack of long-term services funding. So you all in Oregon have really great, like some of the best funding for PSH in the country. So if this is your mission and focus with your project, be sure to highlight it and explain it to investors so that they really understand that your project has supportive services funding and is sustainable over the long term. Also, please, no hard mortgage. In many states, we're seeing more partnering among for-profit and nonprofit developers in order to be able to submit more applications and maybe qualify for different funds. And this can be very beneficial for both parties. I'm talking about co-GP structures, but be very vigilant when entering into any kind of joint venture with other developers. Make sure you have a strongly written agreement that is very, very clear about the different roles and responsibilities of each partner, and work with an attorney, because if things go wrong, things can go very wrong. Changes to energy. Is solar gone? I don't know. Some developers tell me they'll continue to include solar in their developments for the operational cost benefits. And the future of how buildings will be powered is unclear to me, but I'm happy to listen and learn. And so now you've listened to me talk for this long without hearing what you really want to hear. So now I'll tell you what the 9% pricing is. It's going to be in the high 70s or the low 80s. This is the lowest I've seen, other than after the financial crisis, when the price was zero and you had to exchange your credits for cash. But there are still investors at these prices. This means that public funders will need to put in more gap funding, and developers, you will need to defend your cash developer fee payments, and I'm here to help you with that. These payments are super important for feasibility in the eyes of the investors. Next slide, and that is the conclusion of my expertise. But we're here to help. And my colleague Jody Enos and I love to talk to folks about their projects. So please feel free to give us a call. It's our job and we really enjoy it. So thanks again.
Thank you, Anne. That was a lot of great information. We appreciate you joining us today. We want to make sure that we address any of the questions that our partners may have for you. So just a quick reminder that this first Q&A is only going to focus on market-related questions and not on the OHCS process. So I'm going to ask the Technical Advisor Manager, Kate Allen, to let us know if anyone has submitted something in our Q&A.
Sure. Thanks, Aurelie. A couple of questions. One is very general. We have a question, will we be able to get the slideshow? And the answer to that is that we will email all attendees a copy of the slide deck. The slides may also be viewable on the recording once that's posted on the ARH and OHCS website. Next question. Julie asks a question for Anne. Is it your recommendation that PSH projects have no permanent mortgage or hard debt?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. And the reason for that is that it will make your project more attractive to an investor. An investor's greatest risk is foreclosure. So if a lender forecloses on a tax credit project, they can take the tax credits. So to the extent there is no permanent mortgage, private lender who would foreclose on the property, the investor feels a lot more secure. The second reason is that it gives the project a lot more operational flexibility. If you're not trying to make a debt service payment potentially you have more cash available to serve the residents who live there.
Thanks, Anne. Kurt asks, can you elaborate on the high 70s, low 80s reference?
Yeah, so I've seen some pricing for 9% credits, and this is across the country. I have seen pricing as low as 77 cents, and I have seen pricing as high as, I want to say, probably into the high 80s. For US Bank, we are not going to be that high. We are probably capped out around 82, 83 cents. We do have an internal rate of return hurdle that we must meet. There are possibilities that you can find higher pricing. I know that Fannie and Freddie, as investors, and many syndicators have relationships with Fannie and Freddie. They do have a duty to serve, and they do like to do more rural projects. And I have heard their pricing in the 85, 86 range. If you can find those dollars, that is beneficial. Also, if there is a direct investor or a syndicator has a direct investor with a very specific need. So banks and investors have Community Reinvestment Act legislation that they must report on. And these are geographic areas that are mandated where they must invest. And sometimes lenders and investors have very specific geographies and they will pay higher pricing to win those deals. So it's a matter of, networking, talking to people and finding out what might be available for your pricing. Everything is custom. It's not a transparent market in the least. So I would say definitely shop around.
Good. Next question. If using something like the Permanent Loan Guarantee Program from OHCS, would that help with comfort for perm debt in PSH housing? Looks like this asker, no debt is preferred and it's hard to achieve.
I would love to learn more about that. So I'm going to defer on that. I haven't had that discussion internally, but it is very interesting. So thanks for raising that.
All right, Ty, time when you get to update Anne on the Permanent Loan Guarantee Program. Next question. Refers to goals for private versus OHCS conflicts. OHCS currently has said they do not want to fill in gap and want to see larger investments outside the state, and private wants to have less hard debt and wants to see OHCS fill the gap. There's the sort of conflicting goals. Maybe Anne, your part of that is just to say a little bit more about how you get to that statement that you made about the investor side of that.
Yes. This is a constant conflict. It's really nothing new. There is always this push and pull between the private public partnership that we have in terms of who's funding what and who's taking the risk. I think, what we've done lately is to push the risk actually to the developer. And the private folks are going to always want to take less risk. The public folks are always going to want to make as many investments as they can. So I think this is just part of the ongoing negotiation and what makes our industry so very interesting and dynamic.
Thanks for that. And then we'll save the OHCS side of that response when we get to Q&A after Jackie's presentation. We have another one here. And probably clarifying, are you financing rural projects or sticking to more urban areas?
We are definitely financing rural projects. We love to finance rural projects. And the 9% round is a great place to do that. So definitely in the rural market.
All right, it looks like we have another here. Does 9% LIHTC equity generally have the similar installment schedules as 4% equity? Is there any tendency for it being more earlier or later weighted?
I would say it's in general, it's very similar, but capital installment schedules are negotiable. So if there is a schedule that you prefer, and since short-term interest rates and construction interest rates have gone up, we've definitely seen developers prefer to have more equity paid in sooner. The balance is that the more equity is paid in sooner, the lower the price. So if there is an offsetting savings for your interest reserve, or if there is a risk piece that works, that makes it more attractive to you to potentially take a lower price but get the construction loan paid off earlier, that is something you can definitely talk about with your investor.
That is great guidance. Aurelie, that has us through our questions in the Q&A. I don't know where are we on time as far as anyone else coming off mic?
Yeah, we've got just a few minutes left for this Q&A. So if anyone would like to come on screen.
And we just got another. Are investors interested or more disinterested in scattered site portfolios?
Oh, scattered site portfolios are always very interesting. I think that in general, they are the investors would be more disinterested because it is more complex. But to the extent that you have a relationship with an investor who maybe needs to check a box in that particular geography, or it's a very well-structured deal with a great partner, you're not going to scare someone off with a scattered site portfolio. I would say, try to keep, you have to be reasonable about where the sites are. And it has to make sense with your construction plan or rehab plan. It all has to hang together in terms of, does it work logistically? Who's going to manage it? Are you going to have one manager? But I think that scattered sites can be a great tool for maybe bringing together smaller properties that don't operate super well as a 10 or a 20 unit project, but maybe operate better as a 60 unit project. So I'm definitely interested in this.
All right.
I think that's it. Thanks for great questions.
Thank you, Anne. I don't see anything else in the Q&A. I don't see anyone's hands raised, so I'll let Ty introduce our next speaker.
Thanks. So next we have Jackie Santiago, and she's been with the agency for about going on 4 years now. So that's it's close to 28 years in agency land. So I think she's been doing a great job for us. We're being a one-stop shop has its advantages. But the tax credit manager gets involved in everything as a one-stop shop. So thanks for continuing stewarding the program, and she's got a lot of good wisdom to offer about what's coming up in the 9% round. And today we're just as a reminder, we're just focusing on 9%. And if you have any questions about bonds and things around the 4%, feel free to reach out to the technical advisors, and we'll get those questions answered for you. Jackie, and well, real quick, let me, there was a question in regards to goals for private versus, OHCS conflicts, and just want to acknowledge, like, just because of the dynamics of, the federal low-income housing tax credit program, we, as a state allocator, we do have to do, have to stretch dollars. So, it's not an unlimited resource. So given that, we have to make those calls, there is sometimes intended conflicts, but you developer, the developer community, you folks find a way to figure it out. So credit to you folks working with us in partnership. So with that, Jackie, I'll let you jump into it.
Thanks, Ty. Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Ty mentioned, this is going to be a 9% specific topic. The 9% request form is officially open as of January 14th and will close on February 25th. We are offering 11 million this round in 2027 credits. So depending on the volume of requests, we anticipate notifying sponsors by June if the project will move into impact assessment. Selected projects will then have 1 month to complete and submit their impact assessment application. Next slide, please. Just 1 second. Okay. It's important to note that applicants may not receive more than an average of 15% of the annual 9% LIHTC allocation over any 2 sequential years allocations. For example, if a project was allocated 20% in 2025, they will only be eligible for 10% in 2026. I do want to note that if you have specific questions around that for your project, feel free to email me and I'll be sure to answer that for you and give you a more concise number for your specific project. Next slide, please. The 9% set-asides are as follows: 10% for Native nations, 25% for preservation, and 65% following the ORCA regions, which includes rural, suburban and small city, non-metro urban, and metro. We also have 2 cross-cutting set-asides, 10% for nonprofit sponsors and 10% for culturally specific developers. Next slide, please. If you are submitting a 9% request form for a preservation project, you will select one of OHCS's 3 categories of risk of loss. Property has expiring affordability restrictions, property has physical condition challenges and needs major rehabilitation, property has federal project-based rental assistance at risk of loss due to maturing USDA mortgage or other expiring contract. See OHCS's preservation funding overview for criteria on how projects rank critical, high, or medium priority for funding. The maximum in preservation gap funds is $3 million per project. Next slide, please. Here is our updated list of available gap resources. There is $9 million in LIFT funds, $5 million in preservation funds, and $15 million in permanent supportive housing. The max gap limits are up to $3 million in development gap funds, up to $3 million in preservation, and up to $4 million in PSH per project. These funds may not be combined. The max limit is a total per project max limit. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to discuss the application process. The 9% request form and project ranking and selection is after the ORCA intake and before impact assessment. Please note there is no cure period during the project selection process. If you make a mistake on the form before it closes, you may resubmit. However, once the form closes, there will be no cures allowed. So please take your time, make sure you fill everything out, and you attach all necessary documents. You have 6 weeks to complete the request form from the date it was opened. So it will close on the 25th of February. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is how you will submit for the 9%. You will first indicate interest in submitting the ORCA intake form. Please note anyone who submitted an intake form prior to December of 2025 will be required to submit a new ORCA intake. You will then submit a 9% request form. This request form will ask you for information about your project and will have some required documents to be submitted. After you've done filling out the request form, there will be a list of documents to attach at the end of the page. Regardless if you are on a wait list or already have an impact assessment work center, you must complete a new ORCA intake form if you haven't by December of 2025. As a note, to see all questions related to the 9% request form, you will first select whether or not you have completed an intake form, and then check off the project type, and it will open up the rest of the form and all of its questions. For preservation, you'd click which criteria the project falls under, and it will open up the preservation questions. You will not lose your spot on the wait list by submitting a request form. However, if your project is selected, you will have to decide if you will be moving forward with a 9% or the 4%. If you're choosing to move forward with 9%, you will lose your 4% placement on the waiting list. Please also note if your project is chosen to move forward into impact assessment and you already have 2 projects in impact assessment, you will be asked to decide which 2 will stay in impact assessment. Next slide, please. The additional guidance document was released on 12/15/2025 with a technical advisory. The guidance document has provided clarification on topics including the 9% LIHTC funding limit of $2 million, preservation selection criteria, mandatory and supplemental criteria, PSH requirements, the reserve list, and the approach to pooling credits. As a note, those interested in PSH resources must have already been through the Supportive Housing Institute. If you are signing up for this year's institute, you will be eligible next year for those resources. Next slide, please. The 9% request form is in addition to the ORCA intake. Please ensure you've completed both. This is one of the ways that you can be successful. Also, take your time and thoroughly go through the request form, fill out all applicable questions, read through guidance documents, which include the QAP, newly updated ORCA manual, which was just released this month, additional guidance documents, set-asides page, and any other related manuals or documents. If your project is selected to move into impact assessment, you should expect the ORCA steps for 9% projects to have strict timelines to ensure projects meet carryover. Please ensure tasks in ORCA steps are completed within specified times. Know what you're signing up for when using tiebreakers, choosing certain AMI levels, unit counts, etc. When submitting, give your best estimate for required resources, choosing your project size, choosing your AMI level, and the use of those tiebreakers. Projects will be held to those selections and may lose their ranking and eligibility for resources should they change their project after selection. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to do the knowledge check.
Thank you, Jacqueline. There's a lot of great information. We're going to highlight some very key points that you've just gone over. So the knowledge check should be on everybody's screen. I'll give a minute for you to complete it, and then we'll go over the questions together. So I'm seeing responses come in, but we'll go through the questions as you're responding. So number one, will projects be required to honor the commitments outlined in the 9% tiebreaker responses? And the answer to that question is yes. So the QAP states that all information provided in the 9% request form constitute a commitment and that will be enforced during the underwriting process and beyond. So hopefully everybody got that question correct. Number two, if I submit an ORCA intake form, do I still need to submit a 9% request form? The answer is also yes. Projects that are requesting 9% LIHTC will complete and submit both the ORCA intake form and the 9% request form. And just a quick note, we did post links to all of the forms that will be helpful as you're going through this process in the Q&A. So if you need to go back through that, you should find those links there. And then our third question, how long will I have to complete an impact assessment application once I've been notified of 9% selection? And the response is a month. So as Jackie mentioned, projects selected to move to impact assessment will have 30 days to submit their application. So just a few key points that we wanted to make sure everybody understood before we moved on. So thank you everyone for your participation. So we're going to move to the next slide. Thanks. And so we have our final Q&A. So this is your opportunity to ask any questions regarding that 9% process. So Kate, do you see anything in the Q&A?
I do. We're going to go through a couple of the questions that come in through Q&A, and then we can shift to raised hands. And for the first one, I'm actually going to circle back to Anne for just a minute. Anne, at the very end of your presentation, we were asked a number of nonprofits are currently experiencing difficulties with properties in their portfolios. How much of a drag might that have on attracting investors?
I would say that that to the extent you have properties with drag, you should disclose those. You should have an explanation for why. And if you have a plan to correct, hopefully you have a plan to correct performance, you let the investor know what that is. To the extent, it's 1 out of 20 projects are in the red, it's probably not an issue. If it's half the projects are in the red, that could be a real big hurdle to cross. But it does depend on that more complicated calculus of how much cash is being used by the portfolio on an annual basis compared to how much it's producing compared to how much liquidity that the nonprofit has. So this is a very common condition right now for Oregon and Washington developers who are maybe dealing with kind of COVID hangover stuff and tenant protections that are preventing evictions for non-payment. So you are not alone, but I think that being as upfront as you can about these issues will only be helpful.
Thanks, Anne. I was going to also ask, can we refer to it in the last? Ty, if you want to just give us a quick overview of the instrument, the permanent loan guarantee that a couple of folks referred to, just so we don't miss that one.
Yeah, so OACS launched I think last year. It's a perm loan guarantee. I can if any folks is interested in that, where OHCS is basically kind of, it functions like a top loss guarantee of a permanent loan. I can if we can if anybody has any interest in that product, we can we can definitely follow up and get you some information on that. And then we'll also get you some information on that, so you know what it we're so you can if that is helpful for for on the credit side.
Great, thank you. We will also drop a link for the information page on the permanent loan guarantee program into the chat here, or into the Q&A, so folks can see that. All right, let's dive in. First question. Is it correct that preservation projects are exempt from the 2 project per stage limit in ORCA?
Yes, that is correct.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. Next, will OHCS be issuing any preliminary determinations or inviting select preservation projects to complete the impact assessment prior to the LIHTC request form deadline? Or should applicants expect that all impact assessment invitations will be sent after the portal closes on February 25th?
So we will not be doing any preliminary determinations or invitations to complete impact assessment prior to the deadline closing. We do not review any of the submissions until after it has closed. So yes, I would expect to receive an answer by June after the a request form has already closed.
Good. Next, can a redlined version of the ORCA manual updates be made available?
Yes, I've been told that it will be made available.
And those updates generally come with a technical advisory, so that would alert folks to the fact that something is being posted. Sounds right? All right. I am.
Looks like I'm also seeing a question underneath within that same question. From Keith. I'll read it out.
Also asks, is the current open application for 9% LIHTC the only application being used to determine who gets an award? Only those selected go to the impact step.
So the 9% request form is not an application. It is just a request, but that is what is used to determine if projects will move into impact assessment and be able to apply with their impact assessment application. So it's a request and an invitation to apply for those resources, but that is our competitive process.
Thank you. Next, a 30-day window to submit all impact assessment items will require that applicants incur significant costs and effort to procure those items before being notified that they have been successful in a highly competitive 9% review process. Has OHCS considered giving more time so that sponsors can be wise with funding and effort?
So I think that that is excellent feedback, and at this time, that 30-day window will be remaining. However, it is certainly something that we will look into in the next coming request timeline.
All right. Does a project need to be fully funded in order to apply for 9%? That is, do all other sources need to be already awarded besides 9% and the HCS gap resources listed? What if a project is planning a Federal Home Loan Bank source that would not be awarded until December of 2026?
So they would need to already have those resources committed. Unfortunately, December is too far out, and by then we would have already moved through impact assessment and onto financial commitments. So yeah, we would need to already have commitments from any additional resources that you're planning to apply with.
All right,
request.
is the cap on 9% and gap funding irrespective of project size? And given the low LIHTC pricing, will OHCS consider revising the caps?
So it is irrespective of project size. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to revise those caps for this round. Our resources in our gap resources are extremely constrained as they are. There is a very small amount available for 9%. So we do need to ensure that we can stretch those dollars to help fund the maximum number of projects possible so that we're utilizing our tax credits and we're utilizing those resources.
Thanks, Jackie. Next up, are PSH gap resources available to rehab projects, projects that would also qualify under preservation criteria? And would PSH rental subsidy and operating subsidy be awarded or considered alongside the PSH paired gap resources?
So I want to say that I'll have to come back to that one because I am not entirely sure on that answer at this time, but we'll make sure that you get your answer for that.
All right, we'll flag
Oh,
that one to circle.
Sorry, one sec. I am getting that yes, that the answer is yes.
Great. All right, here's another one. Is there a QAP definition or criteria for this mandatory criteria option? And here it quotes, the project includes features in the design, services, site location, or other project considerations that provide opportunities for employment to residents and benefit the community. So we're asking for a definition or criteria around this mandatory.
I don't believe we have a definition on that, but it is a fairly easy to meet threshold in that we want to ensure that your projects are geared towards the population you're intending to serve. And so just ensuring that that you're gearing your projects that way and you're able to say that in your explanation of your project should be sufficient.
All right. And then next up, in the case of a co-development with a nonprofit sponsor who will be the long-term owner and a development consultant, if the development consultant has been through the PSH Institute, but the nonprofit sponsor has not, is the team eligible to apply for a PSH project?
I'm going to defer that one to Megan.
Sorry, I'm rereading it really quick. In the case of a co-developer with a nonprofit sponsor with long-term owner and a development consultant, if the development consultant has been through the PSH Institute with a nonprofit sponsor, is not. So for the PSH Institute, I'm off mute. Okay, so for the PSH Institute clause, the owner, the developer owner, has to have gone through the institute. So if just your consultant has gone through, and the consultant isn't going to be the long-term owner, they're not going to be the person attached to the project, then your project wouldn't be eligible. But if the co-developer who will be attached long-term to the project is the person that has gone through, that's when you would be eligible. But it looks like your development consultant, who I'm unclear how long they'll be if what their attachment is to the project, then you wouldn't be eligible. It has to be the development sponsor, owner, co-developer. That person has to have already gone through the institute.
Thanks, Megan. We're going now. If referrals for a project will be coming through the Homeless Services Department, not the Housing Authority. Should the letter required in the application come from Homeless Services instead of the Housing Authority?
I'm currently following up on that question, and I'll make sure to answer as soon as I have an answer for you.
Good, thank you. We have a question, where can I go to review eligibility for these funds?
So I'm going to assume that we're speaking specific to the tax credits, and you would review the QAP and the additional guidance documents for our mandatory and our supplemental criteria. But if it's related to other funds, I would probably need more information on exactly which funds you're referring to.
Next we have, sorry, I missed this, but when will OHCS announce project selection for the 9% applications?
By June. So we're anticipating anywhere between May and June that there will be our project selection announcements.
All right. Are applications first come, first served, and also prioritized by other qualifiers like ADA units, etc.?
So for the request, they are not first come, first serve. We will choose the projects, and then those projects will move into impact assessments. And the projects that are selected to move into impact assessment, will have already accounted for how much resources are needed to fund those projects. And so those resources will be available to those projects. That's the reason why we want those that are putting in those requests to be as accurate as possible as to how much resources they will actually need, from their LIHTC amount to their gap amount, because we use that to account for how many projects we can fund and how many projects will move into the application phase of the ORCA.
All right. Aurelie, I'm gonna do a quick time check. How are we doing? We have
We're
until
doing good.
good. All right, we will keep blazing on here. Great questions, folks. So 9%, current 9% application that's open. Once it is submitted and chosen to be accepted to proceed, is the project proceeding to fill out another full 9% application, or is the project just proceeding straight to the impact step?
They would be moving straight into the impact assessment stage, and you would fill out the impact assessment application, not a 9% specific, but impact assessment specific application.
Good. Here's a question. Are the culturally specific set-asides for CSOs who are acting as the lead developer, or will they include CSOs who are minority partners and not eventual owners?
So I do have an answer for this, but I do need to circle back around just because I have to find it and read it. But I'll make sure you get that answer, Pooja.
All right. We're asking, can a project apply for both 9% and separate application for PSH funding via ORCA if team already attending PSH Institute to optimize the probability of getting sufficient gap funding?
Well, for those that are attending this year's PSH Institute, they would be eligible for next year's 9%, and would not be eligible for this year's 9% because you have to have already been through the Institute. So, but for those who have already been through the Institute, they would apply. And you guess you can apply for both, but once 9% selections are made, you will be asked to make a choice and then follow through with that trajectory.
All right. Is a housing authority considered a nonprofit for purposes of the 10% set aside for nonprofits?
No, it is not. It is not considered a nonprofit for that set aside.
All right. We've got the 9% request form requires a minimum of $100,000 in funding commitment from a place-based source such as TIF. But then you said funding commitments must be made within 30 days of award. Can you provide an example of an urban renewal agency that can make a funding commitment like that in 30 days? This timeline you are providing for funding commitments is confusing and seems impossible.
So I do want to note that our timeline is similar to how it was with our NOFA process. It is essentially the same timeline to provide around the same amount of information. So it's not new as far as our window for fulfilling these timelines, but we do have really constrained 9% timelines because of carryover and because of the length of the ORCA process. For instance, financial eligibility can be up to 6 months in that process, and we do have to have our projects able to get through carryover and starting carryover in September of next year. So there is kind of a fast-moving timeline that we're just trying to meet so that sponsors and our projects are able to make those milestones. But I'm not able to provide much other than Metro TOD as an example, but I hope that's a sufficient answer.
Yeah, and I would say any participating jurisdiction that you're working with is in the state knows OHCS's processes, so it shouldn't be a surprise.
All right. If there is a preservation project that is also technically an acquisition rehab, which button do we select in the project type question? Alternatively, what is your definition of acquisition rehab versus preservation?
Sorry, hold on one second. Okay, I'm going to defer this one over to Heather to answer.
Yeah, hi there. I would say take a look at the 3 categories of risk of loss that we have, whether it's an expiring affordability, project-based rental assistance, or physical condition challenges being the primary issue. We know that sometimes projects fulfill a couple of those, like you have PBRA in a project and you're doing a rehab, clearly. But you can look at the priorities and the criteria for critical, high, and medium and see which fits best. And if you're doing, well, I should say, as an aside, if you're doing a scattered site, you would want to pick the of those 3 categories, you would want to pick the one that is the majority of the units. It's hard to know in a compared to what, when you said also technically an acquisition rehab, if it's an acquisition for expiring affordability at risk of going to market rate, that sounds like the right category, but I would just recommend that any applicants looking at preservation projects look carefully at the matrices that we have for those 3 categories and see where your project fits best.
All right, we've got a couple more. We're asking what weight will cost, example, all in per unit cost, be given in selection?
So it is not included in our selection criteria. We do not ask about the project cost in this stage. That will be a later stage of ORCA.
All right, and the last question we have in the chat, and I know there's a couple we may want to loop around on. If a project is on the ORCA 4% wait list, can that same project apply for 9s without losing its place on the 4% lift wait list? And then if awarded 9s, the project would then choose 9% path or keep its place on 4%. Is that correct?
Yes, so you can apply if you're on the 4% wait list. You will not lose your placement. However, if the project is selected to move forward with 9%, you'll be asked to make a choice. If you choose to move ahead with a 9%, you lose your 4% placement at that point. And if you choose to move forward with a 4%, you lose the ability to move forward with the 9%.
All right, here we have another just in. In the tiebreaker section, what are the OHCS approved place-based economic development funds? Home, CDBG, and TIF are listed, but where do we find the list of other approved sources of funds for the project to meet the $100,000 qualifier? Also, does OHCS rank projects higher that have a higher amount of local development funds?
So we don't have an approved list. However, you're more than welcome to directly inquire if the funding source that you're looking at does meet that criteria. As well as for if we rank projects higher that have a higher amount of local development funds. And no, so if you have 100,000 or you have 250,000, it's going to be the same rank, and those that meet that tiebreaker will then move into the next tiebreaker to break that tie, which is the LIHTC efficiency tiebreaker on credit amount versus unit count.
All right, that has us caught up, Jackie. Were there any, are we on questions that we paused on? There was one I know in particular about the referring agency for a PSH project. Do we want to circle back around to that one?
Yes, I believe Megan had an answer for that one.
Yes, and I'll repeat the question. If referrals for a project will be coming through the Homeless Services Department, not the Housing Authority, should the letter required in the application come from Homeless Services instead of the Housing Authority?
So I made a jump on here. I made an assumption that the person who put that in the chat is a PSH provider because your referrals are coming through coordinated entry instead of a traditional housing authority path. If that jump is correct, I would say yes, just have your letter come through HSD so we know, because that's not a traditional referral route, right? For projects like these. And then I would just make a note in your of why that's like that, since it would be off of the traditional trajectory that we would see for that. But yes.
And Jackie, I know we were circling on the question about the culturally specific set-asides for CSOs. Are we answering that? Do we have a source for that answer, or are we responding back to Pooja on that one?
Yeah, can you just repeat the question on it?
I will. Are the culturally specific set-asides for CSOs who are acting as the lead developer? Or will they include CSOs who are minority partners and not eventual owners?
So what I have in front of me is that the project selecting culturally specific organization ownership, a culturally specific organization is either the majority owner or sole sponsor, or culturally specific organization is minority owner and has the right to exercise option to purchase at year 15, or culturally specific organization is a minority owner and is first in the waterfall for deferred developer fee. All partnership agreements must be evidenced by legally binding agreements to qualify for this category.
Thank you. I think that catches the questions that we were going to follow up on. Aurelie, let us know. Do we have time if folks want to pop on and ask?
We do have just a few minutes left, so I don't see anybody's hands raised. But if anyone has last minute questions, this is the time to come off mic.
Yeah, one or two.
Oh, we have a question from Christopher. Go ahead.
Hi, this is going back to the project leveraging at least $100,000 of place-based economic development funds. If our project's currently under consideration for home funding, but that award will happen in between, I guess award notice would happen in between when the request form is due and when the project selection will happen. Is it possible to have a letter, let's say, from the funding agency saying that our project is under review for funding consideration, and then have notice of the award come in later?
Yeah, I think it depends on how far late it would be. So for instance, if it was before impact assessment started, then I would say yes, that should be fine. But if it's going to be after June that award will be made, then I would say no, because we have to process impact assessment applications very quickly, and we will ask for proof of that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thought I saw another hand, but I think they changed their mind. But Pooja, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to follow up on that question. So would OHCS require any evidence for that at the intake and request form level? Because those kind of agreements happen much later in the process and the project has already progressed significantly.
Yeah, we do ask for some information regarding it, some sort of proof. And I think it depends on the specific. So like I was mentioning with Chris, if it's something that you'll have information on relatively quickly within that next month or two, having something from them saying that a determination is being made soon would be fine, because we're going to follow up and ask for proof of it. But if it's something that will be much later on in the year, then I would say it would not qualify.
Okay, and just following up on that, so the determination that OHCS would make for the tiebreakers or just making sure that the 10% is for culturally specific organizations, the information would be after that or before that?
That's two different questions.
Yes.
Yeah, that's two different questions. So are we asking about funding
I'm just asking about how the 10% for culturally specific organizations is allocated to actually culturally specific organizations, and how evidence of that, what the rules that you spoke about, Jackie, are actually evident and enforced. That was my question.
So everything that is put into the request form, if we don't receive proof of that, because the request form is largely it's asking questions, and it does tell you if you need to attach any documents specific to certain concerns. Like if they're like, for instance, the housing authority being referred on wait lists, et cetera, like that sort of stuff that will be requested in there. There's going to be certain things I will request you to add and to include. But if not, anything that we follow up on through impact assessment, if it's not true, then you lose those resources available
Okay.
to you.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And then we have Jill. She has a question too.
Thanks everybody from OHCS and Kate. My question is, I saw in your LIHTC 9% restriction talking about an application receiving no more than 15% of the annual 9% allocation, but then there was caps. So if there is a funding gap, even if we maxed out on all the, call it the caps, meaning the four, I'm looking at a PSH project, so I'll just be blunt. And that is a maximum of 4 million from the OHCS gap funding. Does that mean we have the opportunity to use the 9% LIHTC for 1 year and then use some more from the next year? It would seem to me that if that's not an option, then certainly for PSH, the other option is we scale down the project, which is not what the state wants us to do, or the region, because homelessness is so bad.
Yeah, so that particular caveat related to the average of 15% over 2 years is 2 separate rounds. So these credits are 2027, and it's related to if projects received credits in 2026, they can only receive an average of 15% of the offered credits over a course of those 2 years. But if you're applying in 2027, you cannot utilize it that way to split 2 years because we're only offering 2027 credits. And so it's just a 1-year source. And the 15% is, just as a note, is unrelated to the gap resources. They have their limits, and this is related to LIHTC's limit, and we're only offering 1 year's resource. But that particular caveat is in reference to those that received funds in 2026 and ensuring that they know that exists, that there's a limit on a 15% average across 2 years.
If I understood what you just said, it essentially says no, because we're applying for the 2026 9%. We are capped at how much we can get out of 9% for this 1 year.
So they're 2027 credits, and yes, there is a $2 million limit for all projects on the 9%. And if you receive funding in 2025 for 2026 credits, then you have a limit on how much you can have across 2 years if you're applying for a new project. These are separate projects. They're not the same project.
Okay.
Thank you, Jill. And that is all the time that we have for questions. Thank you everyone for your participation. We really appreciate the engagement. Just a few quick announcements before we're done. We do ask that you take some time to tell us what you think about these trainings. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to us. So you should see a QR code on your screen. We ask that you please scan it with your phone, or I will be posting the link to that survey in the Q&A, just to let us know what you think or any topics that you would love us to feature in future sessions. And then we do want to flag some important dates for future ASTA experts trainings that we will have. We haven't finalized the topics just yet, but at least mark them in your calendar because we'll have some great sessions coming soon. And I think that's all. Just the last slide, you'll see the technical advisor email. So if you do have additional questions, go ahead and direct them to us, and we'll make sure to give you an answer. But thank you for your participation, and thank you to Jackie, to Ty, to Anne for joining us, and then all the experts that were also working behind the scenes. We appreciate your help. So thank you for attending, and we'll see you in the next one.